All right, here we go on this Thursday. Yes, let's go. Yes. All right, we are on. We're going to start in just a couple of moments. We'll let everyone, as I like to say, file in. I believe our audio is nice and clear. We're going to start in just a couple of moments. Audio is clear. We are actually even going to do people like this. We're going to do a over the weekend, probably over the weekend. We're going to do maybe tonight, but over the weekend we will do a little bit of, folks. As you know, we're trying to revamp things, constantly improving. There's Janet Dwyer, folks. We're going to talk with our legal expert, attorney Stephanie Murphy, coming up just a couple moments. So much going on. I want to just mention also, I encourage all of you to become a subscriber on our Facebook page. And, that's certainly a way to support the show as things just continue to get better and stronger. Yes, there we go. I don't know what that means. Hi there, Harriet Brown. All right, we're going to start just a couple moments. Folks, as far as Road Patrol Live, so much of it is weather dependent. And also, this time of year, a lot of the crime, it's not like in the warmer months. So we'll do it. We'll do it when it makes sense. I was looking at, it's possible. Weather forecast tonight, although it just doesn't work as well. Maybe tonight. We'll see. Oh, good. That's right. I have the other lens. Then the temperature is going to drop. It's very nice out right now. And then it's going to get stormy over the course of the weekend. My goodness. Hopefully just rain, but big Patriots game on Sunday. I love a lot of the snow is going. And then next week, we're back to cold weather, but certainly not as freezing as it has been. So we're going to start just a couple moments. Folks, there's Melissa. Melissa, I loved your comment to some people. Folks, what we're seeing out, I also want to remind people that what we're seeing right now what you're seeing in Minneapolis, and to me, this is being ginned up so much by the governor and the mayor. To think that the governor last night, Governor Walz, who's good friends with Governor McKee, the fact in this climate, and he encouraged people to go out and film all these federal agents, it just defies reason. To me, that mayor and that governor have not handled this well at all. And I think that they have really inflamed the situation. What you're seeing out there, I just think it's disgraceful the way these people are attacking these federal agents. And, we'll talk with attorney Stephanie Murphy, but I don't think you're supposed to attack any member of law enforcement with a shovel the way that, someone did. They need to get that situation under control, though, because it's starting to, well, it's not starting to. I mean, them taking over the vehicles, attacking the vehicles, everything they're doing out there, it's really atrocious. And so much of this, it is a disgrace, Melissa. Folks, so much of this, to me, also, just they are. It stems from the fact that they don't allow the police to work with ICE. So it is, Charlie. They are. There's no other explanation for it. So we're going to be starting in just 2 minutes. But folks, become a subscriber. If you're on YouTube, make sure you follow. And then obviously our platforms continue to grow on X. But this is what you're seeing is, to me, is political leaders that they're not protecting anybody. That mayor, they've lost control. And how about today? So apparently the governor encouraged students to walk out, and so what do you think's happened? It turned into a riot at the school. If this had been a normal situation, and I've talked about this. What normally should have been done if Minneapolis police would work with ICE, it's very simple. They know who they're looking for. All you need to do is the police to block off the street. They're not there that long. Allow the officers to go in, do what they have to do, put into motion exactly what they're doing, and then that's it. But if you won't do that, you run into problems with crowd control. And it's happening right now. Between that and this whole business of the fact that member of Congress couldn't even answer if a man can get pregnant is just beyond me. So, folks, we're going to begin. Again, good afternoon, everybody, on this Thursday. It is nice out, Thursday, January 15th. Actually, very mild, nice weather. We do have some stormy weather coming, but this portion of the program, visit our website, depetro.com. We want to thank so many of our loyal sponsors. If you're a business owner, contact me. I mean, we've had record numbers of volumes on all of our social media, but I'm always looking for people that want to reach local people. And let's face it, I'll admit, I mean, I don't read the Providence. I don't read the Providence Journal. I'll go a step farther. I don't even watch the local news anymore. If they have a story that I want to watch, I'll just pull it up. I don't sit there. I used to tape the local news. I don't do anything like that. And all the numbers are way off. So, but check us out on the website, depetro.com. Brought to you by the Cohasset Inn, 226 Cohasset Avenue, West Warwick. Remember what we say, lunch, dinner, drinks in the lounge. They also now have the coffee at Cohasset, the Cohasset Inn. They can handle large groups. They can also handle large groups even if it's last minute. What do I mean by that? 25, 30, 50 people, 75 people, 100 people, they can handle it. The Cohasset Inn, 226 Cohasset Avenue in West Warwick. Now, wind farms are the most expensive form of energy. I'll tell you another great form of energy, a real form of energy, is propane. And people are discovering it more and more. And if you use propane, you want to call Propane Plus. Call them today at 401-885-4209. Or in Massachusetts, 508-252-3359. Always online at propaneplus.com. They do a fantastic job. Give them a call. It's Propane Plus. I mean it, folks. I'll share with you my media habits, my viewing habits have drastically, as a matter of fact, changed over time. There's people that still just, they're entitled to do that. I like to say that some of their media habits, Doug White is gone. Jim Taricani, they're both deceased. They're not at Channel 10 anymore. The local media, by and large, to me, I would feel better about some of our local media. Forget about the Providence Journal. I grew up in a household. We used to get the Journal twice a day. The Providence Journal in the morning and then the Evening Bullet in the afternoon. There's no reason. Every once in a while, I'll pick it up. It's all old. I also get a headache now. I forgot about the whole, the story continues on A5 and then you got to go to there. And it just doesn't work that way. But on top of that, forget about the Providence Journal. I mean, they're an extreme. But even the local news, to me, they're just too cozy. I'll just be candid with you. I think they're too cozy with a lot of the local, I don't even call them leaders, just local elected officials. And they allow them to put forth to you a narrative that doesn't match, what you see with your own eyes. That's really why we started with Road Patrol Live, because it's unedited. It's raw, it's live, and we highlight and show things that you're not going to find on the evening news, because that's just not part of the script that they try to follow. In what other universe, if you were going to design a state, and I'm not trying to do a political rant here, but if let's just be honest, if you have a population of 1 million people, and you were going to select some people to be the leaders. If everything was really legitimate, you wouldn't have Governor McKee as the governor. You wouldn't have Matos as the lieutenant governor. I mean, you just wouldn't. And it kind of begins and ends right there. But what you're seeing, more importantly, That governor in Minnesota encouraging people to go out and film ICE agents. Who thinks that's a good idea? And that mayor of Minneapolis, who they're the ones, saying, "Get the blank out of my city." They are in. You have to ask yourself: Are they inflaming the situation, or are they improving the situation? And the answer is they're just inflaming the situation. If you watched any of the coverage, what was going on last night, those are riot conditions, and but it gins everybody up. So as an ICE agent goes to apprehend a Venezuelan gang member, suddenly he's met with a shovel, and then he shot him in the leg. We've heard that a lot. Why don't they just shoot them in the leg? Last night he did actually shoot the individual in the leg. Now, folks, I want to remind you, you never know at any time. You may need legal representation. Marin Barrett and Murphy, criminal defense attorneys, 50 years combined, criminal defense experience. Your fight becomes their fight. Call them 401 228 8271. And joining us right now from Marin Barrett and Murphy is our legal expert, and it is attorney Stephanie Murphy. Stephanie, I want to just start and listen to some of your thoughts of what we have seen play out in Minneapolis, specifically even what we have seen and learned about now this famous encounter where you had this individual, Renee Good, who was shot, and the car is her weapon. I want to just listen to some of your initial thoughts on this.
Yeah, good afternoon, John. So in regards to everything that's happening in Minneapolis, in terms of, it kind of comes down to, possible criminal charges, possible civil liability. So it's really about whether or not, there was a criminal act done by either party and whether or not, there's civil liability and stuff like that. There's a big difference between a tragic accident with no charges and, a really bad outcome of an encounter, and then also criminal negligence or some sort of criminal charges in regards to the performance of an officer's duty and stuff like that. But there's also a civil case too, so there's a lot to kind of look at in this in terms of what happened, what the officer was thinking, what a reasonable person would have perceived, and especially an officer with his history, knowing kind of where he found himself in at the time, what was going on minutes before, what was going on weeks before. That all comes into play when you talk about criminal liability or civil liability.
I want to go through, Stephanie, because I think there's also some misconceptions on what people have the right to do, such as, the ICE agents are there and they're obviously going to get someone. So a lot of these people, they think, okay, I can peacefully protest even though they're there. So let's just take a situation locally, whether you have Cranston Police, Warwick, whoever, they're going to execute a search warrant. Do I have the right to kind of, get in front of them, film them, talk to them, harass them as they are trying to execute a search, not a search warrant, but they have a warrant to arrest someone who maybe didn't show up to court?
No, so you don't have the right to obstruct them in their duties. They're there doing a duty that they believe is lawful, given, whether or not they have a warrant, whether or not they have a search warrant signed, an arrest warrant, whatever they have, the officers are there in their official capacity. You have the right to film them. It's public. You have the right to disagree with what they're doing, but you cannot obstruct them, meaning get in their way or hinder their performance of what they're supposed to do. So whether it's getting in front of them, blocking roads, blocking sidewalks, not allowing them to the front door. Those are things that take it a little bit too far. But you absolutely have the right to not be happy. You have the right to protest. You have the right to voice those concerns, but you cannot interfere with law enforcement. That's a criminal charge, in all honesty. And you can get arrested and you can get charged.
As far as that particular situation, they're approaching the vehicle. They tell her, get out of the car. They're trying to get into the car. Some of her defenders have said, well, she decided she was going to flee. In that situation, if you are confronted with police and they say to you, and this could be anyone, but shut off the engine, get out of the vehicle, do you have the right to just drive off?
No, you don't have the right at that point. Once a law enforcement asks you to make a request, you might have justification after driving off for some reason, but at that moment, no, you have to abide by law enforcement. It's kind of like getting pulled over on a traffic stop. The lights come on behind you. You don't have the right to keep on going. and if you do, there's ramifications and there's consequences to that. So whether or not the lights are on or it's a verbal command from law enforcement, you have to obey law enforcement. You can always fight what happens later, hire us to file a motion to suppress and stuff like that. But you have to abide by law enforcement requests, or you can get charged with a number of different crimes.
And I think some people have a misconception of that, Stephanie, because we were hearing it and I was trying to explain. I've been in a situation where the police are trying to take someone, literally arrest someone, take them out of a house. And then you see family members or friends or bystanders try to, get in the way. They're not who police want, but then they may not realize it. But then now they're breaking the law. They can be detained and arrested.
Right, they're making the matter much more complicated than it has to be, and also risk, them getting arrested too. What I tell people is, the cops are going to do what the cops are going to do. Meaning, if they have an arrest warrant, a search warrant, they're going to execute that and do that. And by standing in their way, whether or not you're the person they're looking for or somebody else, is not going to end well. But you always have the opportunity to, hire our law firm, and we can fight the search, we can fight the felony charge, we can fight the misdemeanor. It's better to, not get in the way, not escalate the situation. And then there's a lot of legal defenses. There's a lot of things that we can do to absolutely help in order to, maybe get the charges dismissed or show they had the wrong person. But in that moment, you don't want to get in the way and you don't want additional charges put on you.
What about, Stephanie, that we're learning more and more that this was actually organized, where these individuals were part of a group, they'd meet, they would, kind of do some training even a little bit. They'd find out where these ICE agents are going to be, and they would use their car to block, I'm in the vehicle, they're blocking my door. I can't get out. They are honking their horns. They are blocking them with their cars. Is that a form of peaceful protest?
I think that goes too far, blocking the flow of traffic, blocking somebody in. Those are all, whether or not you're blocking, just a pedestrian from not going down the street, that's not okay. Blocking somebody into the car, you can put them in fear of a bodily touching. Those are criminal charges and stuff like that. So, no, like we're saying, there's a way to peacefully protest, there's a way to be out there, voicing your opinion. But you don't want to make it worse for yourself and get charges or lead to somebody getting hurt, like in this situation.
And just finally, last night, the governor said, hey, I encourage everyone to go out and film and so forth. So you had all these people out. But then they had another incident where they were ICE was going after some Venezuelan person, and the guy started attacking him with a shovel, and then some other people go, and then, you have another shooting. What defense rights does someone have if they're being apprehended?
What defense rights, meaning can they fight back and stuff like
Yeah,
that?
is that do so in other words, I think some people have a misconception that it's almost like it's a form of you have a right to defend yourself if the police are trying to apprehend you.
No, you absolutely don't have that right at that point. Once you're under arrest, the cops tell you you're under arrest, you're obligated to comply. If not, you're going to be charged with, there's crimes resisting arrest, obstruction. All those are crimes that are going to add to the charges and make it a lot worse when you go before a judge to try to get bail and stuff like that. So you absolutely don't have the right after you're told you're under arrest. You're going to get slapped with a lot more charges if you resist or obstruct. And if family members come in, they can also get charged too.
Now, some local stories. Cranston police identify this woman that was struck on Scituate Avenue. So they find this woman lying by the roadside. She is deceased. They then somehow track it to this individual. He then, once police have an idea of the vehicle, he then comes forward or tells police he was riding along and he thought he struck a deer or some kind of an animal. What is the obligation of a driver of you're riding along late at night and you think you possibly struck something?
So you have a duty to stop in that instance. We had that case with the state police trooper who had no idea that he struck anything and found out after the fact. That's
Right.
not the same situation. If you don't know of anything or a reasonable person would never have known that something happened, then you have no reason to stop. But in a case where you think you hit anything, you do have an obligation under Rhode Island, and the law does require you to stop, to render aid, to contact authorities when someone is injured or killed, and to investigate the situation. There are huge penalties for hit and run, even if it's a hit and run property damage, hit and run, injury, and of course, hit and run death resulting. Claiming to have hit a deer is not a defense. You still have that duty to stop. You have an obligation to call the police and say, hey, this is what happened, or, investigate the situation. But even if you believe you hit a deer, you have a duty to stop under Rhode Island law and make sure that everything is okay.
Let's play this out. It's late at night. This is just a hypothetical with someone's maybe been drinking. It's not their fault. There's someone walking on a dark road. They do strike them. Could they go home and call 911, or is it necessary to stop right there at the scene?
It's necessary to stop there, right there on the scene. You have to remain on the scene. Going home or something like that, I think the police see it all the time. You know, exactly what you said. Someone's drinking, they don't want to get caught for a DUI and stuff like that. But the problem with that is you think about the public safety argument. If someone was just struck and you go home and you wait to call 911, that person could have been saved or treatment could have been given to that person. And you do that, and you could have a death resulting case instead of a bodily injury case and stuff like that. So the law is definitely, you have to stop where you are, render aid. You cannot leave the scene. I've had clients who said they left the scene because they got in an accident and they were really worried that the people were coming at them and that they were going to get attacked. That's mitigation. That's not a defense, in all honesty. You can always roll up the window, call the police, protect yourself. But going home and driving miles away because you're scared of somebody is not the right thing to do either. So the law is very clear, that you have to stay on scene and help render aid, call the police, and wait there for the police to arrive.
And even if you are going to perhaps be charged with DUI, it'd be better than just leaving the scene and then, you're the result of, I would imagine, of a death resulting. Now, Stephanie, we have this situation, a Coventry man charged with arson, accused of setting an East Providence building fire. I heard from someone who claims to be a friend or coworker who said that he didn't actually intend to set the whole building on fire. He was just trying to scare someone that lived there. How serious is it if someone starts a fire and then maybe it takes hold much more than what they had planned it to be?
So I think it's very serious. In Rhode Island, there's all different degrees of arson, but the outcome of what you did, that's what matters, and that outcome is foreseeable. You start a little fire, and you have to. People can know and should know that it can escalate to a really, really bad situation. Fire is sometimes out of control. You don't know what's going to happen. So just because you set a small fire in an isolated location doesn't mean that you're not responsible for the results of your actions. So arson's a very, very serious crime, especially when people are injured, buildings are damaged, and stuff like that. So there's a lot of different laws in Rhode Island, in arson, and there's not many defenses to it, in all honesty.
Hmm. And we should point out, arson's a very serious crime.
Very, very, very serious. Yes, and there's
Yeah.
so many different laws in Rhode Island. We have, I think, 7 degrees of arson.
So someone saying, I just meant to scare them. I didn't mean to start this big fire. That's not exactly going to work in front of the
It's
judge.
foreseeable that a fire could start, something that's out of control, like a fire that you hear all the time. Everybody knows that a small fire can turn into, a huge ordeal, like in California and stuff like that. So, no, it's foreseeable that this is going to be a lot bigger, and starting any sort of fire, unless it's for a fire, like a campfire, something like that, you really have to be careful with it. It's a dangerous road to go down.
And one last question on this. Is the penalty worse if there were people inside the building who then could not get out? Meaning, is it worse if there's someone inside compared to, let's just say it was like a vacant building?
An occupied dwelling, yes, it raises the level of the arson degree. An unoccupied building, just because you luck out and nobody was in that building, is still a big problem, because if people could have been in the building, that charge goes up dramatically. An unoccupied vacant building would not be the same. If it's common knowledge that it's vacant, it's still arson, it's still a felony, it's still a serious crime. But knowing that the building could be occupied, is what really raises the level of arson and makes it much more serious crime. And also in terms of civil liability too, you also have the civil liability of the damage and stuff that the arson caused. So they're very serious charges on the criminal and civil side.
New Year's Day, there was a triple shooting in Chad Brown. The Providence police did make an arrest. 3 people were shot. What about the defense? I heard from the cousin. He didn't mean to actually shoot anyone. He was just trying to shoot into the building. Is the penalty worse? Could that somehow be a defense that he wasn't actually firing directly at someone, but then they were hit when the bullets went through the window.
Not really, John. In all honesty, firing a firearm at at anything at anyone is a dangerous act in and of itself. Let alone into a building where you have no idea where it's going to go, or just trying to scare people and stuff like that. The felony assault charge and drive-by shooting laws in Rhode Island are very serious, and gun charges are taken very seriously. Just possession of a firearm, in Rhode Island, most of the time carries jail. Let alone firing that firearm, also firing into a compact area, a felony assault, putting someone in fear. God forbid someone's hit, it could be murder, it can be, seriously bodily injury. So those charges are all things that you're facing by doing something with not really knowing what your actions could cause.
His cousin claims the people inside were daring him to do it. Some kind of a beef, like, yeah, why don't you come over here? Could that be a defense that they were somehow like calling him, almost daring him to do it?
It's not a defense. Could it be, mitigation if they had it be for the other, the other side had fired a firearm? It's not a defense in all honesty. Any individual, whether you're a juvenile or an adult that fires a firearm, is not a defense that, you're doing it for a dare, or you're doing it, to get back at somebody or to scare somebody. It's the actual act of what you're doing that you're getting charged with, not why you're doing it.
11 teens accused of breaking into abandoned Woonsocket school. I heard from the parents of one trying to say, in her mind, it was common knowledge that kids would, go into this abandoned school and drink and smoke and party. So how is it fair that suddenly these 11 are arrested when people have done it in the past?
Well, a crime's a crime, and every day there's people, drinking and driving that don't get caught and stuff like that. But you could get caught doing it just because other people are doing it, doesn't make it right and doesn't make it legal. Whether or not, it's mitigation in terms of, hey, recognizing that this is serious, my child or the student shouldn't have done that, but this was their understanding, that could help in terms of the serious nature of it, and be like, and it also depends what they were doing in there and stuff like that. Where larcenies being committed, where was a building being vandalized, drugs, drinking. And also depends on their age too. Juveniles first getting charged in adult court, that all depends. But typically with the juvenile system, it's not meant to punish anyone. It's meant to rehabilitate and make sure that this doesn't happen. And it's a good learning lesson for, juveniles and students, that just because someone's doing something and they're not getting in trouble for it doesn't make it okay for you to go and do too. You need to make your own independent decisions and do what you think is right.
Finally, before we get to Murphy's Law, there's a man accused of firing a flare gun at a security guard outside of Walmart. Someone connected with him claims it's not a real gun, and there was some kind of dispute between the two of them. What type of potential penalty could someone look at?
So they could face misdemeanor or felony charges, a felony assault. It doesn't matter that it's a firearm, it doesn't matter that it's a fake firearm, it doesn't matter if it's a BB gun and stuff like that. Those can all be felony assaults in terms of what you can get charged with. So there's a variety of different things. Just because you have a beef with somebody doesn't mean that you have the right to go in and take your own action. Call the police, report it to the store. There's so many different things that you can do. But at the same time, you need to be responsible and act appropriately.
Folks, it's time for Murphy's Law. This is a story that Attorney Murphy has found. And what do you have for us, Stephanie?
So I wanted to kind of bring up what I've talked about, expungements and stuff like that. So I know we've talked about it before, but I think, I've gotten, I think, 2 or 3 phone calls from John, listeners of yours, about expungements. There's 2 different ways to get things taken off your record in Rhode Island. There's a motion to seal, which is for filings and cases that get dismissed. And then there's an expungement statute that if you're convicted of a crime, then what you have to do is you have to wait a number of years, and you have to make sure you don't have prior disqualifying offenses on your record. But I have gotten a bunch of questions, and I always tell people, call an attorney, have them look into it. It's always a better idea to try to file for an expungement and get something off your record, because God forbid you were to get picked up with a new charge, you might not be able to get something prior off your record. So I just wanted to reach out to your listeners who have contacted our office about expungements definitely, if you're eligible or think you're eligible for an expungement or a motion to seal, make sure you get that taken off, because God forbid you get arrested. They're going to see that charge. They're also going to see, like, if you had a prior DUI that's 15 years ago, you would most likely be eligible for an expungement on that. And you're driving down the road and the cops stop you. You might have not had anything to drink, but if the cops see that prior DUI, it might lead to a more serious investigation. Whereas if it wasn't on your record, you would already be on your way. So a lot of listeners have reached out. So I think it's important, call an attorney or go into the courthouse, get your old records expunged, especially before, God forbid, something else was to happen again.
Folks, she is attorney Stephanie Murphy. Stephanie, excellent job as always, and we'll talk to you again.
Thanks, John. Bye.
All right, folks. Now remember, you can call her at the number I put on the screen, 401-228-8271. Don't try to wing it. Don't try to, I meant to ask about the Coventry. That's my fault. I meant to ask about the animal cruelty, but call her, 401-228-8271. Remember, mention the show, free consultation. Free consultation. I have people all the time reach out to me. What do you think about this? Could my brother get in trouble for that? My son did this. I say call them. Call Stephanie, 401-228-8271. I wanted to mention that, and I meant to mention that. That's my fault. That Coventry situation. I don't know, and I'm hearing different things of someone that knows this woman in Coventry facing animal cruelty charges after police conducted a well-being check for the animal. If you've seen the picture, Circlewood Drive, the fact Hans, the German Shepherd, he was emaciated, his ribs, hips, spine visible, no signs that the dog had access to food or any water. Animal control officer took custody of the dog, and they charged Caitlin Pelton, 25 years old, as the dog owner. Folks, I don't know. Do I even have to? Apparently I need to, as an element of almost public service, I guess. But if you are under the weather, if you're sick, or you are spending a lot of time at a friend's house, at a boyfriend's house, at a girlfriend's house, that's no excuse to just lock a dog into a sunroom where the dog has. What I have a problem with is, one thing, there's no food. It's another thing, then they're like pooping there, but they're not having even any water. There's no food or water for that German Shepherd. So it'd be one thing, again, if you weren't letting the dog out and then the sunroom had, you hate to say it, but urine and dog poop, but to not even have some element of food and water for the dog, I just, and I did get a message from someone, telling me, take down her picture. You don't know what happened, and she's a wonderful person. Listen, a pet is responsibility. And when you decide to get a pet, a dog or a cat, it's an element of responsibility. And this she's 25 years old. Whatever happened, whatever was going on, what I can't get past is the no food and water. Again, ideally the dog should be taken out, and I also just want to mention, I received kind of a nasty message from someone connected to this Caitlin Pelton, the 25-year-old dog owner. There's no excuse for that. Whatever was going on, if you were, this whole business of shame on you and take it down, and maybe she is a wonderful person, but unless you're in a coma in the hospital, I can't think of another circumstance that would be satisfactory, that someone has an animal just left alone there with no food or water. So, started a new job, has a new boy, whatever those things are, you have to make accommodations. You don't allow, and we have the pictures up on the page of that poor dog, Hans, that apparently now the Coventry animal control officers kind of brought the poor dog back to life. But you have to make, I don't know. I'm always, maybe I shouldn't be surprised that then I hear from these people like, how dare you take that down? And she's a wonderful person, and you don't know what happened. And you must really not like it. Has nothing to do. Let me also just be very clear. This is a white female that they charge with this. I was going to post the photo of whoever that person was because the story just is so, it makes me so angry and irritating. So whoever that was, if that was a 90-year-old woman, I was going to post it. So this business of, how can you be so, you must, it's just foolish stuff. Never mind she's Caucasian. If she was Black, Hispanic, it'd be like, well, you're a racist. It has nothing to do with that. Whoever does that to an animal. I believe that the laws in the state for animal cruelty, I think they should be more severe. I think in Rhode Island, for whatever reason, we go pretty light on a lot of those. But there's just, in this day and age, you're not living in a third world nation. You live in Coventry. There is that a dog doesn't get in that type of condition overnight. And if you went away on a trip or went out of town, it's cruel to just leave a dog there with no food or water. And I'm not going to say much more about it, but some of the messages, and one person in particular, if you keep sending these messages, I am going to post them because they're so ridiculous. What did she, like, it's so foolish. I'm embarrassed to even mention it. What did she ever do to you? I don't know this person. The only reason I know it is because I received the release from the police. That's what it is. How do you know them? You must have something. I don't. I was going to post that story, fill in the blank of name and picture of whoever that person was. It just happened to be that particular person. Hey, if you have a pet, why not call Mike Rizzo at Capitol Fence, 401-618-4407, 401-618-4407, Capitol Fence. You can find them online at capitalfenceri.com. Now, residential or commercial, whether it's a fence or a gate, they are the most trusted for privacy and security, serving Rhode Island and Massachusetts. Capitol Fence. Call them for repair and maintenance, the highest quality. When they install a fence, it'll last for years. They do installation, durable fences, automated gates, free estimate. They're licensed and insured, whether it's a picket fence, whether it's a vinyl fence, whether it's a chain link fence. Maybe it's a gate for your driveway. They have those. They open and close as you come and go. Capitol Fence. Call them 401-618-4407. Maybe you have a pet. Maybe you have a child, grandchild. Maybe you just want a little more privacy and security. You have the right. Protect your home, protect your privacy, protect your business and your property. Capitol Fence. Call owner Mike Rizzo, 401-618-4407. So to me, that is just no excuse. And I don't, if you went away for the weekend, a dog wouldn't look like that. So I'm not going to go on and on about it. But I want to come back to the situation we're seeing in Minneapolis. This is what happens when you have people that are holding office that should not be there, that are ill-equipped. Now, you ask yourself, all of our local leaders got a taste to see what it's like to be on the national stage. Actually, the Brown shooting put them on the international stage. Were the local leaders ready for their, as they would say, like a Norma Desmond, were they ready for their close-up? Were they prepared and ready to handle not only just national press, but international press? Because Brown University was then covered around the world, really. Well, I'll tell you something that it doesn't get highlighted a lot, but it's that Providence City Council. And this is where I think Mayor Smiley, the mayor of Providence, I think where he has to be careful is the city of Providence, their city council, led by that city council president, Rachel Miller. They continue to pass these resolutions. They don't want the police to cooperate with federal agents. They don't want the Providence police to cooperate uh, with ICE, whether law enforcement, anything like that. And could this happen in Providence? Whenever you have a situation where you don't allow the law enforcement agencies to work with each other, that to me is the real problem. Let's go to the Brown shooting. With the Brown shooting, you obviously had Providence Police. You also had the Brown Public Safety. You had the state police. From what I understand, the Rhode Island State Police were fantastic. The Rhode Island State Police were instrumental and very valuable working with the Providence Police. You had FBI. You had FBI Boston there. You had, when we would have the press briefings, you had FBI Boston. You had Providence Police, obviously. You had state police. You also had, obviously, the Brown Police, not as helpful. But when we were up there, you had Cranston Police up there. You had, my point is, all of the different law enforcement agencies were all rowing in the same direction. What you have in Minneapolis, and it's not highlighted enough, is when you have these progressive Democrat elected officials like Tim Walz and Jacob Fry, and them ordering their police force not to work with ICE. That's where, and Tim Walz even almost declaring war against federal agents. It's so destructive. And I've yet to see, has anyone seen that Mayor Jacob Fry or the governor? I haven't seen them say one thing yet that I would deem to be responsible or helpful in any way. Everything is about, we want to protect our neighbor. God, I'm sick of hearing that term. And that Walz, that governor, folks, the only good news about him is, and remember, when he came through here with Harris, Governor McKee said he's one of the finest governors. That guy is such a clown. I think the only good news that we're seeing out of Minneapolis is if Harris had won, he would actually be the vice president and she'd be the president. Do you see also all the work they're doing in Minneapolis? So much of this is a result of the open border policy and policies that these progressive Democrats have allowed to fester. Now, as far as Rhode Island, and also there's been a lot made, and I agree, these people, I find it shameful that these same protesters that we've seen, and we'll just say locally, at the Rhode Island State House or at St. Paul's Church in Edgewood on Saturday, to actually have the photo of Renee Good, who got into the altercation, ran her car at the federal agent, and then was shot as she was trying to kill him. He had to use necessary force to stop the threat. But notice they don't even mention the name or names of Americans who have been killed by these illegal criminals. I'm so glad that girl that they called it out and said, they never mentioned my sister. This is a young woman. Her sister was killed by an illegal, someone who shouldn't have even been here. But I want to talk about how Rhode Island really continues to inflame the situation. But I want to remind you about ServPro of Providence. Folks, call them today, 401-941-5500. Now remember ServPro, fast, thorough, professional. If you have a fire, you're going to have fire damage. You're going to have smoke damage. You're then going to have water damage to put out the fire. Then you could get mold. ServPro of Providence, call them 401-941-5500. They're available 24/7. When disaster strikes, call ServPro of Providence. Whether it's 3 in the afternoon or 3 in the morning, 401-941-5500. Something that our local press does not highlight is because they give them a free pass. And I really saw it firsthand, and I've told this story before, when during COVID, when I would attend those COVID briefings with Rhode Island Governor Gina Raimondo. I attended over 100 of them. And at one point, it was her and one of her staff, and we were talking afterwards. Now, keep in mind, this is 2020, and you have the election coming up in November. And she said something akin to, what is it like to be the only member of our local press who's actually voting or will vote for Trump? Now, number one, obviously that question was inappropriate. Number two, there was no reason to say that. They were kind of smirking to each other. But I actually didn't mind it because it clarified. I was very clear where I was. And I couldn't have been more clear who I supported. Yes, so put me in the room, and I think they threw out the number 25. Now, there weren't that many people attending the briefings, but I think the number they said was, out of 25 local members of the media, I was the only one who was supporting the president. One of the reasons for the coverage you see is because of so many of our local press. They are 100% on board with it's about the policies. And I want to be very clear about that, because Governor McKee, he inherited the policy. It was really Chafee that put it into action. The Rhode Island immigration policies that we have right now, that the state has right now, it was not like this under Governor Kachiri. It was not like this under Governor Allman. It was not like this under Governor Sunland, or you go back to the Dupree years. This was when Chafee was the governor, and there was pressure on him to give them driving licenses, and he would not, because I don't think he could get the support for it. But he was basically the one that changed the dynamic and made it more difficult for ICE to get. It's all about getting the prisoners transferred. And my point is, you don't hear that talked about enough. Now, I have highlighted. Do you remember last spring, there was that video of Portsmouth police? Portsmouth police had an illegal. I mean, I found it ridiculous at the time. It's even more ridiculous now, almost a year later. They contact ICE. This video went nationwide. Portsmouth police, following the state provisions, policies of Governor McKee, and they call ICE, and ICE has to get 5 people on the sidewalk, and then Portsmouth police bring the illegal who's wanted out to the front steps of the Portsmouth Police Department, Portsmouth, Rhode Island, and then they let him go. And now it's a game of like manhunt, of hide and go seek, where then they have to run and like throw a net on him. Instead of, as I have talked about, the problems you have at our courthouses, at the ACI, and this is where I think Tom Holman is effective. This is where you don't hear this angle covered in Rhode Island, and that is Governor McKee, with just the signing of a pen, he could then switch back to that when there is a prisoner that ICE wants, that our local law enforcement will hand them over. And I've talked about this. Do you remember there was the situation last summer? There was a standoff in Cranston on Warwick Avenue, and I grew up there. Ferncrest, Henry Street, Warwick Avenue, right there, and then there's a Park Avenue, right? And so this was someone wanted out of East Providence. So Cranston police finally got the guy out of the house, and they detain him. And then East Providence police, suddenly you see an East Providence police car come, and they transport from one Cranston police into the custody of East Providence. That it would be as simple as that. And I think that's very effective. I don't think a lot of people understand that. And I don't think that's explained enough in our local press, Channel 10, Channel 12, Providence Journal, that's all that would have to happen. But because they won't do that, ICE is forced to go after someone on the street. And it's far more difficult in that manner. People, and I've talked to so many police and I've been with them. It's so difficult if you're going to take someone out of a house. You don't know who else is in the house. Any member of law enforcement that is watching or listening, the team you can't trust. There's Jane Rice. You you never know. You don't know who else is in the house. You don't know if they have a weapon hidden somewhere. I've been with police where there's somebody trying to go back into the house. Why are they trying to go back into the house? That maybe they have a weapon under the couch, in their bedroom, in a drawer. So the police that I have dealt with and worked with, they wait until they're going to emerge. And then they try to get them in a driveway, in their driveway. It's harder that way. But at the courthouses, there's a big deal at some of these anti-ICE advocates are outside of the Rhode Island courthouses. And what I don't hear anyone fully explain in our media is it shouldn't be that way. If inside are, when he's there at the courthouse and they have him in handcuffs, if they would just transport him into the custody of ICE, you wouldn't have muckle on the sidewalk. You wouldn't have that they have to grab him outside. So much of this is avoidable. And where I think Providence should be very, very careful, and Mayor Smiley specifically, is if something goes wrong, and let's say there's a shooting, and an ICE agent working in Providence shoots someone, then are they ready for the microscope? Are they ready for the bright lights? Are they ready for the microscope? The Providence City Council, they would be nowhere to be found. They would step back and let Mayor Smiley handle all the questions. But it's the Providence City Council that makes it more difficult. You should know that. They make it more difficult for the police. The Providence City Council, that Miguel Sanchez, that Justin Royas, Rachel Miller, some of the other ones, they're socialists. They're anti-police, Gonzalez, defund the police, anti-police. But if something goes sideways, I guarantee you they'd be nowhere to be found. Folks, this portion of the program, if you're someone who's looking for options for daycare, Kids Club on the Pike. Now, they have several locations, but it starts with their main location right on Plainfield Pike, where they have before and after school care, preschool, but daycare. Kids Club on the Pike. They have half and full day programs for preschool children 3 through 5. They provide transportation before and after care for school children 5 through 12. Kids Club on the Pike, but they have several locations in Warwick. Call Kristen 401-443-5336. And they also utilize Kids Club on the Pike. We're located right on Plainfield Pike on the Cranston-Johnson line, right off 295. It's Kids Club on the Pike. I think that would be the real test, would be if there was a shooting, because you had that David Morales. He's a representative. He's running for mayor of Providence, and he stood at that rally on Sunday, and they give out the phone number, and it's the ICE whatever network that they have, and they have it set in motion right now. I've talked about it a little bit. There was someone that they were going for. Do you remember this? This was on Douglas Avenue, and it was sometime last year. So there was someone that they were going to go for, and meaning someone that they were looking to arrest, but it wasn't ICE. It was just federal agents wanted someone like that. And so what happened was they all these people just started showing up. So it's the Deportation Defense Network. The People United, we'll defeat ICE terror. The Deportation Defense Network. And they have their phone number, and they give it out, and they staff that, and they try to get people out there if then something is going to be happening, and they try to get them to show up and they try to get them to interfere and blow horns and yell and push and interfere with the officers. And Providence does have that. Now, it doesn't get the attention, but those people are basically recruiting and training people to break the law. That's what's going on. And I think it also should be highlighted that if you're a regular person, that David Morales, he's a rep in Providence. He's running for mayor. So I think it could be, I see where it could be confusing with someone that says, well, there's an elected official who's telling me that if ICE is on Valley Street or if ICE is on Cranston Street, that I have every right to show up and use my car to block them in and push the officer, and if they form a human barrier, you actually you don't have the right to do that. But what I notice is I don't see any coverage of anyone calling them out on it. Folks, on as the weather gets more pleasant, remember Watson Materials. Make the most of your outside. Largest selection of landscape materials in Rhode Island is Watson. Call Sean 401-885-0600, 401-885-0600. Watson Materials, landscape lighting, pavers, retaining walls, natural stone, cobblestone. Watson Materials. A friend of mine went to town at Watson. He has been watching all these football games outside. He's got the flat screen, he's got heaters, he's got the fire pit. It's hilarious. He built an outdoor living room and he got everything from Watson Materials. 401-885-0600. I also want to mention, it's not your imagination. The flu season is really bad right now. That's why more and more people, and from what we understand, there's 2 strains of flu. If in fact you are someone or someone is dealing with the flu, make sure you stop by and see Marie at It's My Health, 1099 Mendon Road in Cumberland, diagonally across from Davenport Restaurant. So if you're listening right now to AM 1380 or 99.9 FM, or maybe you're listening online at depetro.com, stop it and see Marie. And then especially if you're someone that's overcoming the flu, there are people, there's 2 strains of flu out there. And I'm seeing online people, I've never been this sick in my life, and blah, blah, blah. Well, it's going to take your body a little while to recover. So have someone go for you and stop in and see Marie, there's Big Mike, at It's My Health, 1099 Mendon Road in Cumberland, diagonally across from Davenport Restaurant. It's My Health. That's right. No one illegal can stay. I agree with that. Yeah, that's right. Well, they do get things, by the way. They are given things. I think it's interesting. I want to credit Mike Chippendale. He put out on X, and he's exactly right. And you see it locally where people like Governor McKee and Sabina Matos, the lieutenant governor, they will say illegals do not receive, blah, blah, but they don't get Medicare, Medicaid. But the fact of the matter is there are things that they get them. And there are things, in fact, that they provide for them. They just give another name to it. So they don't call it that, but they absolutely do. How about last night? The same people, this is Mike Chippendale, the same people say they should have just shot him in the leg. Last night they did shoot him in the leg. And they're still complaining about it. But no, they come up with another term where they give them emergency SNAP and relief and things like that. I'll tell you, that governor and mayor, that is not leadership. Encouraging your people, your citizens, your neighbors to go outside and battle it out with federal agents, that is not going to end well. There's a lot more productive things that these people can do with their time. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy your Thursday.